When it comes to black and white film, there is one thing that you will never get in a black and white image, and that's color. I mean, duh, right? You can't get color in a black and white image. That kind of makes sense. Now, if that's the case, why would a photographer ever use a filter with a colored tint to it? Well, in this one, we're using Ilford's Delta 400 to explain kind of the process and why you might want to consider picking up a colored or tinted filter for your black and white images, because they do have a very specific purpose and they're actually really cool. So let me show you. Now, when it comes to filter, there are all kinds of different options, different variations, different brands, all for different purposes. Some are more general than others, some are very specific, but there are all kinds of filters, and these two have a purpose, especially with black and white. More specifically, when it comes to using a colored or tinted filter inside a black and white image, basically you're doing an in-camera or practical version of contrast and color specification adjustment, which is basically just to say that by using a filter, you're then highlighting certain colors in your image. For example, when we use a yellow filter or a red filter, which are part of the warmer color tones in the spectrum, those are the ones that are going to be allowed to pass through the lens and pass through the filter to the film stock, which is then going to brighten those colors. Compared to something like a green or a blue, which would stand on the opposite side of the spectrum, those will not be able to pass through as easily, making them darker. So basically the idea here is that your warmer tones in this case are going to be a little bit brighter versus your cooler tones, which are going to be a little bit darker. So in that case, if we take a photo of a building which has a blue sky, we'll notice that the blue, when we use the other filters, is going to be a little bit darker. Or in the case of the first couple of images where we used the baseball stadium, you can see that the colors are adjusted and a little bit darker, a little more contrast than they would be in the originals versus the no filter photos. Because when you take a standard photo, depending on your lens and camera and film stock of choice, you're only going to get so much contrast in camera, usually. However, when you apply something like a colored or tinted filter, you're now adjusting the spectrum that film stock is going to accept. But probably the best example I have to show you what I'm talking about here is this photo of a 1980s model Mercedes. But first, when we look at the no filter versus the yellow filter, we notice just a little bit of contrast change. So the road's a little bit darker, the shadows on the car are a little bit darker, the taillight is a little bit darker in the no filter versus the yellow filter, but generally these are very close. And that's typically because the yellow filter is more of like an all-arounder. It's only adding just a little bit of contrast compared to what you're going to see in the red filter. This one is completely different in a lot of ways. So when we look at the third image, which is the red on the right, we now can see that it is completely different than the first two images, specifically the no filter, because that taillight is almost black because it's such a dark red that it's rendered at a dark black on our film stock, versus the red filter, which matches the color of the taillight lens, and now we can actually see that it passes through and connects with our stock at a different kind of wavelength, allowing for a different shade on our film stock. Now there is a caveat to mention here, and that depends on what kind of film stock you use along with which filter. Depending on the filter, you're going to lose a little bit of light and potentially a lot of light depending on the strength or color of the filter. So keep that in mind, that you may have to adjust some things in order to get proper exposure when using a filter like this. However, on the other side, this is absolutely manageable because you can do a lot of different things to adjust exposure, either by using a different film stock, one with a higher ISO, either using a wider aperture, or adjusting your shutter speed up or down kind of thing. You can also do it in post-processing with pushing your film or pulling it if you need to. There's a lot of different ways to do exposure adjustments, especially with film. Some films are better with it than others. All of these things can play into getting a better exposure using your filter. So I just want to make sure that I mention that because I don't want you to steer clear away from filters just because you think that they're not going to work with your lighting situations. So keep that in mind as well. But now's the time, if you haven't already, hopefully you'll hit me up in the comments down below, letting me know what you think about. Are these some ideas? Are these filters that you think would be really good for your work when it comes to using black and white film or film photography in general? Just let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings and opinions, or examples or stories, all of that kind of information in a comment down below. And beyond that, hopefully you'll check out my links for Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, All of those links for the usual socials are down in the same box under the description. So let me know what you're thinking about there. Leave me some love there as well. Super appreciate that too. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for checking this one out. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. And for now, peace out.